Today we have spoilers, yet they don't show us what happens next. They show us what happened long ago when the old gods ruled the planet, and help to answer some of the biggest questions we've had about the modern lore. That's because, after years of shadows and trickery, Xal'atath's history has been blown wide open. We know her form, a being of pure void, that it took the combined might of the old gods to lock her in the blade, and how, like everyone else Xal'atath used, it all began with an offer. A bargain struck with N'Zoth that would one day lead to his end, and the series of expansions that we're in now. And all of this is from an ancient and terrifying story, one that tells of a war that shook the Black Empire to its core. A loss on the day, but one that ensured Xal'atath survived where the old gods did not. First up, a little bit of context. Patch 11.1.7 brings a new feature. It's called Lore Walking, and it's with the character of Lore Walker Cho. We sit down beside him in Dornegal and are suddenly transported back in time to play through a story. At first, we're retreading Xal'atath's rise in our own time. Finding her in Tirisfal, realizing her strength after absorbing the essence of the Faceless One so powerful that Tyr in fact sacrificed himself to defeat it, her maddening whispers driving us around Azeroth in search of artifacts and artifact power, eventually the search for her body, everything that led us to the Crucible of Storms, where she demanded this from N'Zoth.
Hear me, God of the Deep. I have brought you the Opener, the bringer of truth, the torch that lights the way. Honor our bargain. Free me to find my own fate.
Go. But the blade must remain to serve my will.
What we saw was a bargain for her freedom, one that N'Zoth accepted. Now that's all stuff that we knew from playing Battle for Azeroth. That should have been the end, but then Lore Walker Cho dropped this bombshell. And the bombshell's fairly simple. It's the origin of their bargain. He tells us of a war between Xal'atath and the old gods, one where she was an equal, and how the fallout of that war led to the deal with N'Zoth, one forged in secrecy that we would play through during Battle for Azeroth. That is the foundation of Xal'atath's modern lore. It's literally how she got her body. This is the bargain that turns Xal'atath from victim to victor. It is how she outwitted the old gods. We open on the Black Empire. A hulking commander of the Akir tells us that Xal'atath has attacked. We see Ny'alotha choked with void portals, and all around, void is fighting itself. We see waking shadows battling faceless ones, Akir destroyers fighting void shapers. It seems a bit weird. They're all void, but if you look at them, the difference is obvious. Those under Xal'atath's command are cosmic and pure. They're not at all like the corrupted flesh of the old gods and their minions. In the quest, we're told that Xal'atath stands no chance against their evolved form, yet when we look around, her forces are many, and we, in this case playing from the perspective of a helper of N'Zoth, well, we go on a little quest, lighting the beacons that connect the realms of Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, and Y'Shaarj. Now, Yogg-Saron tells us that Xal'atath's betrayal was inevitable, but that she played her hand too soon. Cthulhu adds that Xal'atath is not like them, and that because of that, she can't understand the glory of their Black Empire. Finally, Y'Shaarj tells us he knew Xal'atath would attack Ny'alotha whenever she learned what N'Zoth was building below it, which absolutely sets a mystery up for us. Let's make sense of all that. Xal'atath arrived in Azeroth as Harbinger of Dimensius, Dimensius being the Void Lord responsible for the fall of the ethereal homeworld. His ultimate plan, we believe, is to consume Azeroth. That's literally why the old gods exist. But unfortunately for Dimensius and those who serve him, like Xal'atath, those old gods soon had desires of their own. Now, we'd been told way before that the Void Lords and the old gods didn't really see eye to eye. But here we see in-game proof. That alone is interesting, but it's not what we're here for today. No, we are here for what happens next. Xal'atath is dragged before the manifestations of the four Azerothian old gods, and we see her true form. at least a representation of it. Not an elf, not an ethereal, but an old model of a void wraith. Literally like something we would have seen 18 years ago in the Burning Crusade. Now, this was all in the public test realm. This model could just be a placeholder, but even so, it tells us something. First, it tells us what she is not. An old god. Yes, Xal'atath is not an old god. I already thought that. We did an entire video on it, but this is tangible in-game content. It's an in-game quest. That makes it the highest level of canon that there is in a world like, say, Warcraft's. Second, we see that she is a being of pure void. As much as this model is a little bit underwhelming, it does show us what she's made of. So perhaps she's the void equivalent of a constellar, like Algalon. Or maybe, as some believe, she's a fragment of Koresh's world soul. But regardless of the specifics, we know she is playing for capital V Void, while the old gods, well, they're playing for themselves and their Black Empire. After declaring her inferiority, Y'Sharj lays out her punishment, only for Xal'atath to brush it off.
Eternally sealed. You shall only watch this world as it gains untold power without you. You shall never lay claim to it.
Eternally pathetic. You are mere pestilence, parading as lords. This is not the end of the game, only the beginning. And I have all eternity to play.
Now that you've heard that, I have to imagine you're asking the same question as me. All eternity to play at what? Why is the Void here trying to claim dominion over Azeroth from itself? Well, the answer is actually simple. Azeroth. The World Soul Saga is telling us one thing loud and clear, that Azeroth is powerful. In Khazalgar's archives, we discover that the closer the Titan servants got to Azeroth's soul, the more she began to influence them. And before long, Earthen, sent to build a protective shell around the World Soul, rebelled. And when they rebelled, they tried to break the shell, almost as if they were breaking Azeroth out of prison. And across Khazalgar's questlines, we learn that the Earthen would often develop free will somehow, only for the Titan's other servants to deactivate them. And from this, one thing is fairly clear. Azeroth causes change. And we know the old gods arrived in Azeroth long before the Titans did. Their tendrils sank in just as deep. They utterly dominated the planet. Azeroth's entire surface was Black Empire. So, if they had already won, if they had already claimed the entire world, what stopped them from finishing the job? Chronicle Volume 1 is unambiguously clear. All gods exist to corrupt all that they touch in a blind search for world souls, right? So we learn that the Void Lords created the old gods for this purpose. Yet in Azeroth, they clearly failed. They did not finish the job. When Xal'atath said, "You are mere pestilence playing at lords," she actually means that. Pestilence is all the old gods were, all they were supposed to be. They existed not for their own ends, but just for their creators. Just like the Earthen of Khazalgar, who existed as thoughtless workers, all to work towards the Titan's plan. So, what happened when those Earthen got close to Azeroth? Well, they, in a way, woke up. They developed free will. What happened when the old gods reached Azeroth? We don't literally know, but I think we can infer that they also changed, that they perhaps developed wills of their own. Note how they see Xal'atath as a lesser being as compared to them. Now this raises two immediate questions. 1, why did the old gods not finish the job? 2, why would Azeroth grant her enemy, these old gods, free will? Now I believe that both questions share an answer, and that answer is survival. In giving the old gods a sense of self, of a will of their own, she awakened desire, she awakened a survival instinct. So rather than finish the job and, I suppose, wake Azeroth up as a Void Lord or whatever they were supposed to do, which would probably make them irrelevant and dead, well, each old god instead furthered its own power, built a massive empire. They fought each other for dominance on the surface and under the surface of the world. No wonder Xal'atath, as Harbinger of Dimensius, then sees them as pestilence parading as lords. They're basically mold. Mold sent out to ruin their enemies, just that Xal'atath gets there, and what does she find? Oh my god, the mold is now intelligent, and it's got ideas of its own. That's not exactly good for her. Hence, pestilence parading as lords. Regardless, in this situation, Xal'atath was powerless, and with a scream, she is trapped in the blade. But that's not the end of today's story. Lorewalker Joe takes us out of the story so he can add one last bit of essential context, and this, dear viewer, is where it all comes together. In that moment of seeming defeat, she struck like a viper from the darkness. In a voice that only N'Zoth could hear, she offered a bargain. Just listen to this.
But that was not all Xal'atath said. The tablet states she whispered in a voice only N'Zoth could hear.
Consider what greatness could be yours if your siblings did not stand in your way. The offer stands. You need only reach out and claim it.
Okay, how many times have we heard the same thing before? I mean, during the War Within, Queen Ansarek, Gallywix, and the Order of Night. Before that, countless instances. Modgood, Natalie, Selene, and say the Pale Orcs. In each scenario, Xal'atath gets her way by offering solutions to her target's problems, and in this case, N'Zoth knew he was the weakest old god. Xal'atath knew that he knew, so that's what she targeted. And that is the story of how Xal'atath went from Harbinger of Dimensius to a voice locked in a dagger. What happened next? Well, the contents of this video that we made happen. It details her time in the dagger. It's a great watch after this video. But here's how it plays into what's going on in the game right now. So one by one, we kill the other old gods, right? That happens in Vanilla, Wrath, and of course Myths of Pandaria. And when N'Zoth was the only one left, well, what happened? Xal'atath hails us as the opener, the torch that lights the way, and she takes us to N'Zoth. The deal worked out. Xal'atath got to have her freedom. N'Zoth got his shot at victory. He took his shot. That's patch 8.3 of World of Warcraft, where we got the Horrific Visions feature that is returning to the game now. Obviously, N'Zoth lost, and that means that it's now Xal'atath's turn. So, we now know the bargain struck between N'Zoth and Xal'atath, and that it was just another stepping stone on her pathway to claiming our world soul. Maybe for herself, maybe for Dimensius. We don't exactly know yet. We know the Black Empire is now dead, and the old gods with it, but there are huge questions in the story that are primed to rock Azeroth to the core. What were the old gods working on before their defeat? Think back to the words of the old gods, that from Yasharj's perspective, the second Xal'atath knew what N'Zoth was building, her betrayal would be a foregone conclusion. Whatever that means, it means that what she's building would not be good for the old gods. And the old gods, well, they were denizens of Azeroth. What are we? Denizens of Azeroth. Whatever N'Zoth was up to, whatever he was building below the Black Empire, it is going to be relevant. This might be relevant in the Midnight expansion, where we will deal with the ultimate clash between light or void. It could even be relevant in The Last Titan, where we'll probably get closer to the World Soul than ever before. All we know is that it'll be bad for us, but we can infer an interesting little thing. The old gods were making that presumably for their own ends, right? N'Zoth was the one who was leading that. But Xal'atath then struck a bargain with N'Zoth. That would probably mean that for N'Zoth, he would no longer want to do whatever he was doing with whatever he was building, because he craved power. Power over the other old gods, and that ultimately is what this bargain was for. So, whatever N'Zoth was doing, well, maybe if he had been successful on patch 8.3, we would have found out. But now perhaps, whatever he built will be what Xal'atath uses to enact her plan. But more tangibly, we know N'Zoth ended up like Xal'atath's many other allies. Her fingerprints are all over the downfall of the old gods, and of course, specifically N'Zoth's. The final thrust to break N'Zoth's carapace came from the blade of the Black Empire itself. I'm sure Zal found that to be rather hilarious. But if you want to see how deep this story really goes, then you need to check out this video. It details everything we've known about Xal'atath up until this point, because What comes next launches us into midnight, and that is where her long game will finally come to its conclusion.